All right, good morning. Thank you all so much for being with us this morning and joining us for today's SCORE Institute, the value of post-secondary education in Tennessee. I'm David Mansuri. I serve as president and CEO of the State Collaborative on Reforming Education, and just really great to be with you all this morning. So today's Institute will focus on the value of post-secondary education in Tennessee by taking a look at economic and labor data and pairing it with the perspectives of Tennesseans, including a unique look at the perspectives of 18 to 24-year-old Tennesseans in our state. SCORE commissioned this research because fewer Tennesseans are going to college, in part as a result of the pandemic, and there is growing evidence of concern about whether post-secondary education is still worth it for students as labor market conditions continue to evolve. So as you'll hear throughout today's SCORE Institute, our findings are that post-secondary degrees and credentials have value, and Tennesseans still find them valuable and important. But we must do more as a state to ensure that career connectedness, cost, and time do not limit that value for students. So a few data points and observations come to mind as we begin this conversation this morning. In May of 2022, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission shared data that revealed a 9-point drop in the college-going rate in Tennessee since 2019, continuing a trend that began in 2016 and was exacerbated by the pandemic. In the fall of 2022, THEC engaged in a statewide roadshow supported by our team at SCORE for conversations with nearly 400 stakeholders from Memphis to Kingsport. Attendees raised questions about all parts of the process to obtain a post-secondary education, including the decision to attend. We heard that students received mixed messages about next steps following high school as Tennessee's labor market tightened and wages increased for jobs available to adults with only a high school degree. And just in particular, every region we visited had a story to share of an entry-level job advertising $20 an hour or more, which is obviously a very attractive wage for most recent high school graduates. The second area that we heard a lot about was the process of attending post-secondary education. We heard that many students were not receiving the advising strong pathways and culture of supports to ensure that they successfully applied and enrolled at programs that lead to high wage and in-demand careers. And then finally, concerns around attendance and completion. So stakeholders shared concerns about debt and the perception of the rising cost of attending four-year institutions, combined with the need for non-academic supports to help students complete their credentials and degrees. So these concerns help explain some of the ongoing challenges in students' path to a credential in Tennessee. And based on current data, only 1 in 5 high school students in Tennessee successfully navigate the pathway from high school to completing their post-secondary credential. Every year, 100 students in Tennessee begin high school in our state. 89 of those 100 will graduate from high school. Just 47 of those students will then enroll in post-secondary education. 32 of those 47 will return for a second year. And then just 16 of those 32 will actually graduate in 6 years. So this final number, while already concerning, is actually 1/3 less than the number of students succeeding prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is true despite steady post-secondary completion rates for community colleges and universities in our state over the last few years. And we also know that persistence and completion rates for students of color and those from economically disadvantaged backgrounds continues to trail their white and non-economically disadvantaged peers. These are also the same students who may see even greater wage and lifetime benefits from successfully completing a post-secondary credential or degree. And then these conversations and student trends are also not unique to Tennessee as the country reassesses the value proposition of college in the midst of conversations related to student debt, employers changing perspectives on workforce training, and a labor market that, at least in the short term, continues to increase wages for jobs requiring only a high school education. So what does this mean for Tennessee? To support policymakers, education leaders, practitioners, and other stakeholders as they think about a path forward for Tennessee given these headwinds, SCORE commissioned research from the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research, as well as a public perception survey from Public Opinion Strategies and Impact Research to better understand several questions. One, what do the education and labor data show is the value of earning a post-secondary credential in Tennessee? Two, what do Tennesseans, and in particular 18 to 24-year-olds, currently believe about the value proposition of post-secondary education? And three, what can be done to better support students to and through post-secondary education on their way to careers that enable economic independence? So we're really grateful to have our researchers from the Boyd Center, as well as our public opinion researchers here with us today. Soon they'll share some of the specifics on their findings. And I wanted to preview for you first what SCORE is really taking away from some of this research, both the economic research and the public opinion research. One, post-secondary education matters. It matters in terms of lifetime earnings. It matters in terms of obtaining a great job in an in-demand career. And in addition to that, Tennesseans aspire for students in the state to obtain a post-secondary degree or credential. They want it for their children. They believe it's important to preparing students in the state for a career. And they also favor some of the most important efforts the state has put in place to support students on that path. Efforts like Tennessee Promise and expanded career and technical education programs in middle and high school. However, when post-secondary education results in students going into debt, or doesn't guarantee a student a clear career path, skepticism increases. And Tennesseans know that some people, particularly in today's economy, can get a job without any education beyond high school. Tennesseans believe our higher education system needs to be working better for more students. Tennesseans also believe that we're not doing enough to prepare high school graduates for higher education or for a job. To be clear, and you'll see this in the survey data, 71% of voters say Tennessee's high school graduates are not prepared for a job. So critical priority for our state is ensuring more students are prepared to obtain post-secondary credentials and degrees that are aligned with career and workforce needs. So we'll begin this morning with a presentation from Dr. Celeste Carruthers on the Boyd Center's report, Tennessee's Post-Pandemic Workforce Implications for the Value of Going to College. Then Robert Blizzard and Brian Stryker will share the results from the December 2022 Public Opinion Survey. And we'll close with a conversation between K-12, post-secondary, and workforce leaders, reflecting on the information and what they think leaders in our state can do to respond to the information that we'll see this morning. And so during that conversation, we're excited to welcome Harry Allen, co-founder and chief relationship officer at Studio Bank, Dr. Yolanda Jones, president of TCAT Northwest, and Sean Kimball, superintendent of Lauderdale County Schools. We'll begin this morning with Dr. Carruthers, who's presenting the report on behalf of her co-authors on this project. And just as a brief introduction, Dr. Carruthers is the William F. Fox Distinguished Professor of Labor Economics at the Haslam College of Business at the University of Tennessee. Her research centers on education policy, with crossovers into public economics, labor economics, and economic history, with recent and ongoing projects examining the effect of financial aid on college choices, career and technical education, and schooling in the early 20th century in the United States. She serves as editor-in-chief of the Economics of Education Review and has earned degrees from the University of Florida, the University of New Hampshire, and Appalachian State University. Welcome, Celeste, and I'll turn it over to you to share the findings from your research.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you to SCORE for supporting this work. I would also like to credit my collaborators, Don Bruce, Larry Kessler, and Linnea Endersby, who are also here in the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research. All opinions and errors are our own. You can find the full report here, and I encourage you to do that because it has much more than I will be able to touch on in this quick presentation. And this is why we're here. This is the same figure that David showed. It's depicting the percent of 12th graders who are going straight to college the year after high school, and it has been declining sharply since the high school class of 2020, the first pandemic era high school class. And what I'll add to his comments is that this pattern is not limited to young adults in Tennessee. College enrollment is falling across the United States, especially in community colleges, but not only in community colleges, and for both young adults and also older non-traditional age students as well. So why are fewer people going to college? There are probably lots of reasons, and those reasons are likely different today than they were last year, different than they were in 2021, and different than they were in 2020. We think that the labor market probably has something to do with it. It's likely a factor. Employers are having a really hard time filling jobs, and in response, they are raising pay. They are recruiting directly from high school. There's a local story from the Knoxville area. They are handing out large sign-on bonuses. This was a Burger King paying $1,200 sign-on bonuses in Knoxville last year. And they're relaxing education requirements. They're opening up jobs that typically required college, to kind of workers with no college degree, but maybe some experience and kind of some other credentials. So someone without a college degree today has more job opportunities at potentially higher pay than they would have had just a few years ago. And we think that that presents an appealing alternative to college for some people. So the question is, what is the value of going to college in a tight labor market? So on the one hand, to be very frank, I am sympathetic to the 11th or the 12th grader or to the adult without college who is looking at this labor market and who doesn't want to take on college loans and who is questioning whether it's kind of worth the time and investment to go to college or to go back to school. The labor market right now is very, very tight. Lower wage workers are seeing pay bumps, sometimes in excess of these high inflation rates that we're all experiencing. In the report, we estimate that the returns to an associate's degree or to enrolling without college have been falling for the last few years. We also find that Tennessee is outpacing the nation in high school level job availability, if not pay, but in the volume of those jobs. And we've seen many examples of employers, both public and private, providing in-house credentials such as badges, relaxing education requirements, providing more on-the-job training in lieu of those education requirements. But stereotypically, for a report by economists, there is another hand. And on the other hand, we find evidence that there's still kind of a strong case to be made for going to college and that the investment in college still pays off on average. So we find that earnings and unemployment continue to favor college-educated workers. Over the lifetime or over a career, someone with a bachelor's degree earns on average $1.5 million more than someone with a high school diploma but no college. The premium for an associate's degree or for enrolling without completing degree are somewhat smaller but still significant. We also find that Tennessee has been growing jobs at all education levels, but have been growing college level jobs fastest. And despite these many kind of examples of relaxed education requirements, we don't yet see workers with a high school diploma but no college moving into these college level jobs in large numbers. We are indeed in the midst of a labor shortage in Tennessee and throughout the United States. There are about 2 job openings per every unemployed individual looking for work. The Federal Reserve has been aggressively raising interest rates in hopes of cooling the economy and lowering inflation, but the labor market remains very, very tight. Based on the most recent data from nationwide Census Bureau surveys, college-educated workers still earn significantly more than workers with a high school diploma or less. Worker with high school earns a little more than half of what someone with a bachelor's degree typically takes home in a year, and 82% of what someone with an associate's degree typically earns. So this figure depicts annual income by education again, but over time, again for the nation. And using the most recently available data up to 2022, we find a sizable income gap between workers with a bachelor's degree, depicted in the solid black line, and workers with an associate's degree or some college and no degree. And this gap has even widened somewhat in the most recent years. The income gap is smaller if we compare the bottom 3 line patterns in this figure. If we're looking at like comparisons between workers with an associate's degree or some college but no degree and workers with a high school diploma and no college, depicted in the blue dashed line. And that gap has narrowed somewhat in the last several years. Workers with a high school education have caught up to a modest extent, but there is still a gap by education. So we'll come back to this narrowing a bit in a moment, because the previous figures kind of left a significant part of the picture out. They were limited to full-time workers. And so it's important to emphasize that college educated workers are also more likely to have kind of full-time employment or to be employed at all. Workers without college tend to be more likely to go through spells of joblessness. So recent data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that high school graduates without college are 3.9% likely to be out of work. That is a very, very low rate of joblessness. That's good news for that population, but nevertheless, it's twice as large as 1.9% unemployment for workers with a bachelor's degree. So another important thing to consider, particularly for young people who are debating whether to go to college or to take advantage of higher starting pay right now that they're seeing in the labor market, is that the income gap between people with and without college tends to widen with age. So this figure from the report depicts that gap, and it shows the difference in annual earnings between people with a high school diploma versus people with 3 different levels of higher education depicted in the figure by age, from 18 to 64. So we find that this income gap increases over the course of a career as college educated workers accumulate more raises and promotions. So adding it all up, we estimate that a typical worker with a bachelor's degree will earn $1.5 million more over their career. That's in 2022 dollars compared to someone without college. So the premium is $224,000 for someone with college credits but no degree, and $375,000 for an associate's degree. And these figures are similar to what others had computed using pre-pandemic data. But we know that college is expensive in terms of time and money. So what we did next was we estimated the internal rate of return for these 3 different levels of higher education. And so the internal rate of return in this context is the private rate of return that would make a student indifferent, financially indifferent, ignoring the non-financial benefits of higher education for the purposes of this exercise. It would make the student indifferent between spending 2 to 4 years in college versus investing those tuition costs at age 18 and going to work instead. So I admit that this is an unrealistic trade-off for almost every 18-year-old, but it is similar to the decision to take out a loan versus take out a loan to go to college versus go to work and not take on that debt. And this thought experiment allows us to track how earnings with and without college compare to the costs over time. And those costs are both the tuition cost and the indirect cost of enrolling rather than working. So we replicate and extend a similar methodology published by the New York Fed before the pandemic. And we find that the return to a bachelor's degree has remained high at 14.5% and even edged up very modestly over the last few years. The return to an associate's degree, depicted in orange, has fluctuated around a downward trend, and we estimate it to be about 9.5% currently. So that still compares favorably to historic returns on stocks and bonds, which are 7 or 3%. And the return to an associate goes up over 10% when we adjust the method to include part-time workers and unemployed workers, because as we've shown earlier, workers with an associate's are less likely to go through these spells of unemployment and have no income. So completing college matters a lot for later earnings, however, and we estimate a lower 6 to 7% return to enrolling in college without completing a degree. And that's consistent with what others have found using different methods and using a variety of different data sources. Going to college is a good investment on average, but it's not guaranteed. And it does not pay off for everyone, particularly if they do not complete a degree. So our rate of return analysis was based on national data because it's the most recently available, but we can zoom into the state level using a 2021 Bureau of Labor Statistics survey of employers to get a sense of where we're seeing more job growth in the state. So we find that pre-pandemic, that's what's highlighted here, the state was growing high school level jobs. That's jobs where typical entry-level education requirements do not specify college. but they were growing college level jobs somewhat faster, 5 to 10% for jobs requiring education up to an associate's or bachelor's degree. So in the years immediately surrounding the pandemic, the state lost more high school level jobs, either because the jobs themselves went away or because they weren't filled, like a combination of those two things, but continued to grow college level jobs. And putting these time periods together, we find that the state has added about 6% more jobs expecting up to an associate's degree in the last 5 years, 18% more bachelor's level jobs, and maintained about the same level of high school level jobs. The report has a lot more on this, including comparisons to the rest of the United States and including breakouts between metropolitan areas in the state of Tennessee and our more rural non-metropolitan areas. So one insight from that analysis extended is that Tennessee jobs and employment overall, regardless of education level, have been growing somewhat faster than the United States, and that these patterns, these have a more concentrated growth in college level jobs, are similar in both the metro and the non-metro parts of the state. So in the future, earnings and employment gaps between workers with and without college could change very profoundly if the line between what I've been calling high school level jobs and college level jobs gets blurry. So if more employers start doing away with these education requirements and actually hiring high school educated workers into jobs traditionally required college, a lot of these computations could significantly change, and the long-term return to college could weaken. And we've seen a lot of examples of this in the media, and so we wanted to look into it to the extent possible in data available to us. So using National Census Bureau surveys, we find that about 18% of high school graduates without college have occupations that typically require some level of college at the entry level today. So it is certainly the case that you can get a college level job without college. There are a lot of different reasons why that might be the case. But we're not seeing that figure change very much in recent years. It's only risen from 17% pre-pandemic, despite a really historically tight labor market. And then digging in further, we find that this small 17 to 18% increase is driven mostly by older workers, not new high school graduates jumping into what have traditionally been jobs limited to workers with college. So the report includes a brief summary of relevant employment and population forecasts from a separate Boyd Center report, the economic report to the governor. And key insights there are that Tennessee employment growth is slowing like the nation, or is expected to slow, but it is expected to grow faster in Tennessee than the rest of the nation. This is helped along by more people moving to Tennessee from other states, more so than internal population growth in Tennessee. So like the nation, Tennessee is aging, and this demographic shift in the future may put downward pressure on college tuition as institutions compete for a fewer younger, traditional aged 18 to 22-year-old college students. In Tennessee, we're expecting fast growth in the leisure and hospitality industry that has low education requirements, and it might seem like good news for high school educated workers looking for more job opportunities. Unfortunately, this industry does also have lower pay compared to other industries. We are also expecting faster growth in professional and business services, however, and that has a number of occupations with varied levels of education requirements and higher pay. So to briefly summarize the takeaways from the report, and I do encourage you to dig into all the detail that's in the document itself, we find that the short-term value of a high school education has improved modestly since the onset of the pandemic in 2020. So this improvement, at least in the short term, if not over the course of a long career, has cut into but not minimized the return to an associate's degree and the return to enrolling in college without completing a degree, both of which compare favorably to private returns to investing college costs elsewhere. And we also find that the estimated returns to a bachelor's degree remain very high and have even edged up slightly in the last couple of years. In Tennessee, job growth and pay growth, that's also in the report, continue to favor college graduates. And we are not yet seeing workers with a high school education move into these college level jobs in large numbers. So thank you very much. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or comments, and I encourage you to take a look at the full report.
Great. Thank you so much, Celeste, for going through that really rich data and look at the labor, education, economic data to start our institute today, and really appreciate the work that you and your additional researchers have done on this study. Just really interesting data. I would just say I particularly appreciated the points on how the long-term payoff from going to college is still positive with higher lifetime earnings, particularly in the middle to late stages of a career. And I think it's certainly important to remember that this is a long game, and we have to help students better understand that high-wage jobs requiring minimal education now are often taken at the risk of more lucrative careers that yield dividends later down the line. Also appreciated the findings that the returns on investment are certainly not guaranteed, and I think take it as our homework as we think about next steps to better understand the underlying pathways and specific post-secondary programs that can better guarantee success for students in Tennessee. So next, we're going to dive into what Tennesseans think about post-secondary education and add in a particularly unique focus on the perspectives of 18 to 24-year-olds. So we saw the economic and labor data and research. We now want to see the research on perspectives of Tennesseans on many of these issues. And so I'm pleased to welcome Robert Blizzard, who's a partner at Public Opinion Strategies, which works with Republican candidates and corporate and nonprofit clients and causes across the country, and Brian Stryker, who's managing partner at Impact Research, which works with Democratic candidates and also corporate nonprofit clients and causes across the country. Thanks, Robert and Brian, for being with us today and for doing this bipartisan research on Tennesseans' perspectives on post-secondary education. I'll turn it over, Robert, to you and to Brian.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us this morning. This is Robert. My good friend Brian is our Democratic friend on this poll. We did a pretty robust statewide survey of registered voters in kind of a bipartisan fashion. Typically when we do a statewide survey among registered voters for a political campaign or another cause or issue, you're typically looking at a 500 or 600 sample survey. This one, we went with a more robust sample of 800 registered voters across the state, so we could have a little more confidence in the subgroup data. But then, as David mentioned, we also did, I think, is the largest sample that we've seen, at least at the statewide level, of just 18 to 24-year-old registered voters, where we did an N of 250. Typically in a statewide survey or national survey, you might only have 5-6% of that poll might be among 18 to 24-year-olds, which if we did a 500 sample, you'd be looking at a very small sample size. So we wanted to really up that so we could really take a look at that very important cohort of voters. I'm going to run through the first kind of half of the deck, and then I'll turn over to my good friend Brian. But just some takeaways from the top from the survey. I think number one, when you look at higher education, kind of in the general sense, there is a lot of positivity about it. They view higher education favorably, voters and 18 to 24-year-olds. Yet when we do a follow-up, there is some softer, and I say softer, satisfaction with the way the state's higher education system is working today. It's not as if we're at a crossroads or the jury's out, but there's certainly some softness in the data about how people are feeling right now, about how things are going and how things are working. And a lot of the polling we saw, not just among the voter sample, but also looking at 18 to 24-year-old voters, there's some tension in the data. There's some conflicts. They say kind of one thing, but then they react in a very different way on a different question. I mean, for example, there's a lot of importance placed on getting some type of training, some type of education beyond a high school diploma. But then at the same time, voters across the state, as well as those 18 to 24-year-olds, think that someone can be successful without a college degree. There's some worth itness to it, if you will. There's a strong sense that getting something is in the post-secondary sense is worth it, especially when it comes to TCAT, 2-year community colleges, non-degree job training programs. But then again, on the very next question, which you'll see in the data here in a moment, when we asked folks if they had a son or daughter, which of the following would they be most likely to recommend their son or daughter apply to, a four-year college or university it still has that kind of highest preference. They're all, preferred very well, but in terms of the hierarchy, four-year university or college still kind of tops the list. The other data point here I think is really important, and I think it's an opportunity more than anything else, is to really attach career readiness and a focal point of getting a job or having a career out of post-secondary. Because when we ask kind of an up or down, straight up or down, what is more important, or what is really the purpose of higher education? Is it more to identify an area of expertise for a career, or to create a well-rounded, broadly educated citizen? By more than 2-to-1, voters across the state, and again, including 18 to 24-year-olds, really look at the purpose of higher education to really create, some sort of expertise for a career, rather than just making them kind of a well-rounded, broadly educated citizen. The other thing I think is really intriguing, and I know David said it, I think from the top here, is there's not necessarily a lot of optimism about how well high schools across the state are doing in terms of preparing kids for higher education or even for a job. And so the data in here, you've got at least 2/3 and a strong majority of voters and 18 to 24-year-olds are kind of pushing back a little bit, saying that high school graduates coming out are not really prepared for higher education or for a career or for a job. Looking at 18 to 24-year-olds specifically, again, very similar trends. There's a strong sense that getting an education beyond high school is worth it. But there's also a strong sense when you look at the data that the value, at least the perception of the value of an education beyond high school, has gone down over the last couple of decades. And then, there's significant concern over cost. Cost kind of runs through this data. We are at a very weird time right now in terms of cost. As we all know, cost has been a concern in the higher education space, for a decade plus. But now you're kind of, that's kind of dovetailing right now with, rising costs and inflation also being kind of the number one economic issue across the country. And so it's a really challenging spot right now for a lot of people in terms of cost. There's a strong sense among voters that they'd be willing, especially these 18 to 24-year-olds, that they'd be willing to take on college debt if they were guaranteed a good job after graduating. And I think back on the cost angle, we had some questions asking these 18 to 24-year-olds, about their own ideas about post-secondary. And among those who said that they did not plan on going or weren't sure and hadn't made up their mind, we asked folks, what would make you more likely to attend? And you'll see in the data here, most people point to some sort of financial aspect, whether it's being able to make money while they go attend school or better financial aid, as the items that would make them more likely to attend. So kind of running through the data here, on the national level, inflation, costs, the economy, a big concern. You've got immigration, you've got abortion, you've got all the issues kind of being fought at the national level. But looking here at Tennessee at the state, we asked folks which of the following should be the top priorities for the governor and the legislature. Asked for first choice, second choice. So looking at the combined choices here. And you can see two issues really rise to the top: economic concerns, whether it's the economy, jobs, and cost of living, followed closely by K-12 public education. What I think is really interesting about this data is not necessarily just where education is as a whole, but also when you look at the right side, look at 18 to 24-year-olds specifically. The fact that 18 to 24-year-olds also rate K-12 education as such a high priority for the governor and legislature. I think that just puts an exclamation point on concerns and challenges facing K-12 right now. And again, it makes a lot of sense when later in the survey you see significant majorities of all voters in 18 to 24-year-olds aren't really sure if high schools are measuring up right now in terms of getting kids ready for life after high school. In terms of attitudes towards higher education, as I mentioned from the top, there's a general sense that higher education is viewed obviously in a positive way. We gave folks a list of terms, as favorable, unfavorable. You got more than 3/4, 77% of all voters view higher education favorably. Strong majorities of Republicans, independent voters, Democrats, and again, as well as 18 to 24-year-olds all view higher education in a positive way. The challenge, though, is when you ask kind of a follow-up about when you're thinking about universities, colleges, community colleges in the state, basically, how satisfied are you with the way the state's higher education system is working today? And so on the surface, 64 to 27, people say that they're satisfied, 60 to 34, as you can see on the right side, among 18 to 24-year-olds. But the intensity here, just 15% of voters are very satisfied with the way the state's system, higher education system is working today. Just 16% of 18 to 24-year-olds. So they're kind of the benefit, you're giving them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but there's not necessarily this strong sentiment among voters or 18 to 24-year-olds or anyone here across party lines that things are really going well when it comes to the state's higher education system. We asked folks, we gave them kind of these institutions or different programs, if you will, tech colleges, community colleges, non-degree job training programs, and as well as four-year colleges, universities. And we just want to get a sense of how favorable they viewed these. And you can see all of them are viewed very favorably. Even four-year colleges, universities down at the bottom end here is still a very positive 75 to 18 fave, unfave. But look at the hierarchy for a minute, kind of moving left to right across the screen. Tech colleges, you're at 60% very favorable. That's twice as high as where four-year colleges and universities are. Community colleges are even rated a bit better than four-year colleges and universities, just on the surface of kind of general impressions of those programs or institutions. However, when you ask folks, as I said at the top, if you had a son or daughter who was graduating from high school, how likely would you be to recommend that they consider applying to these four different things? And you can see the hierarchy changes a bit. Four-year university or college kind of still is number one. Then it's two-year community college. Then it's TCAT. Then it's non-degree job training program. So I think the good news is, look, the worst is you've got 3/4 of voters across the state say that they would recommend their child applying to a non-degree job training program. But again, that hierarchy, it's kind of an interesting divide, whereas four-year university colleges are rated the lowest of the four in terms of favorability. But then when it comes to recommendations for their child to apply there, university and colleges kind of tops the list. Tennessee Promise. We've done a lot of work over the years for the good folks at SCORE and other like-minded organizations in the state, focus groups and other survey work. And we've always kind of nibbled around the edges a bit on Tennessee Promise. And there's always been a little bit of feedback about what kind of information folks really know. And so we just want to get a sense in this survey, how much do people know about Tennessee Promise in general? And you can see on the left side, among all voters, 14% say they know a lot about the program. 34%, about a third more, say they know some. But I think in an encouraging sign, we look at 18 to 24-year-olds on the right side, almost 4 in 10 say they know a lot about Tennessee Promise, which is actually a pretty decently high number, with another third saying that they know some. What we wanted to do was then kind of put everyone on a level playing field in terms of knowledge about Tennessee Promise. And again, going into the survey, we weren't necessarily sure, how much people would know about the program, and people would come at it from different angles. So we gave them just this very simple paragraph in the middle of the slide here that under the program, students graduating from high schools are eligible for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship, 2 years of tuition-free education at a public community college or technical school in Tennessee. And then we asked that likelihood to recommend using the Tennessee Promise. And I think in an encouraging sign, a lot of support here. 77% among all voters say they would be very likely, 92% total likely. And on the right side, among 18 to 24-year-olds, again, very similar numbers, 76% say they would be very likely. So a little information, a little background about Tennessee Promise, can go a long way, I think, in terms of improving participation and getting more folks to start thinking about that program in a more realistic fashion. And then the last couple of slides I'll do before I turn over to Brian. Priorities, the necessity of college. Looking at this, voters, a three-way here. What's the purpose of a post-secondary education? Is it to prepare students for a career, enable students to expand their horizons and learn new things? Or is it to prepare students to be civically engaged and productive citizens? Very strong numbers here for career prep, for a career. 62% of all voters, Republicans and Democrats, white and non-white, and by almost 2-to-1, 18 to 24-year-olds all believe that the primary purpose of a post-secondary education is really about preparing students for a career, which I think is really interesting data. And you don't, for the most part, you don't typically see a lot of issues and a lot of similarities between how Republicans and Democrats, white and non-white, view things. But the fact that you have significant majorities are all on that kind of career focus, I think that's a really important finding. And then another part of that conflict, which I think it opens up for probably more conversation, is we asked some agree disagree statements here on the survey. A lot of agreement with this, which is kind of one of the things I said at the top. It's important for Tennesseans to get some type of training or education beyond a high school diploma. You can see very strong agreement, 93-6 overall, 84-15 among 18 to 24-year-olds. However, when you look at these statements, there's also a very strong sense that someone can be successful without a college degree. And on the right side, there's a lot of disagreement that you need to have a 4-year college degree for a good paying job. So again, a lot of voters are telling us, hey, it's important to get something beyond high school. But at the same time, they're also telling us, yeah, but you know what? I can also be successful without a college degree. And, I don't necessarily need a 4-year college degree to get a good paying job. And so with that, I'll turn it over here to my friend, Brian Stryker.
Sounds great. So there is real concern about the cost. 85% of people saying they're concerned about the cost, almost 60% saying they're very concerned. More concerns among Democrats than Republicans, but pretty clear across the board, and real concern among young people about the cost of college. And that's education beyond high school even, right? But then when you ask people, is it worth it? Right, that's a different question. So people are saying it is expensive, it is worth it. It is too expensive, but it is worth it. About half of people are sure that it's worth it. Democrats a little bit more sure. They were the ones most concerned about the cost. But overall, you see 80 to 90% of all groups saying it is worth it. I think the concern number, if I'm going to flag one here, is among the 18 to 24-year-olds, where only 18% are saying it's definitely worth it. So they think it's probably worth it, which is the other choice that we gave them. But they are not completely sold on the value of education post-high school for the money they are getting, right? They're not seeing those stats we saw earlier that this pays off for people. You can move to the next slide. Now, we asked more specifically about different types of education, and you can see it varies a little bit. 4-year university or college, people the least sure it's worth it, still at 75%, still really, really good numbers. But even better numbers for 2-year, for non-degree job training program, for TCAT. So for those programs, there's almost unanimity. And you see big numbers of people saying it is definitely worth it. So it's really the 4-year college, which they are getting sticker shock and have a little bit of questions on. But broadly, people are saying, yes, a higher education is worth it. An education beyond high school is worth it in Tennessee right now. The people who are not sure or saying it's not worth it are saying two things. Well, three things, really. They're not getting the right skills, right, to prepare them for the workforce. That's one reason people are saying it's not worth it. Another is that there are good jobs out there without a degree, which you see as more common among young people that are saying, there's a good job for me. Do I need this education? I can go make money today. And then there's some group that is saying something slightly counterintuitive, that kids are having a hard time finding a job after graduating, which kind of conflicts with that point about, there are good paying jobs out there without a degree, but it really is a jobs question. Am I getting trained for a job that will pay me more, that will justify the cost of this expenditure for education? What do people see high school is doing here? There is real concern of whether high school graduates are being prepared for higher education. 60% say kids aren't ready. 2/3 of people who just graduated from a Tennessee high school, or some of those people did not, the vast majority did, but 2/3 of those people 18 plus who were just in a school are saying they're not sure graduates are prepared for higher education. And even more are saying that they are not prepared for a job. So people are feeling like they get out of high school and a job and college they're not quite ready for it right now. We see a real desire for investment in skills programs in middle and high school. And this goes back to that question of preparing people for a job, not just higher education, but 75% of voters, 68% of voters 18 to 24 say it's very important to expand programs helping people prepare for technical careers and skilled jobs, advanced manufacturing. This is very common across states. And interestingly, it's when you see numbers like this, it's common among people who graduated from college, among people who think they're going to college, and among people who didn't. So this isn't just non-college people think one way and college people think another way. This is very broad-based across the population. We did a little bit more of a dive on some of these 18 to 24-year-olds. A quarter of them have completed some sort of higher education program, and about another quarter to a third are in four-year college or university. So the majority of them are either getting or have gotten some sort of advanced degree, especially when you add in the 12% currently attending community college or technical college. There's only about a quarter who either aren't going, say they're planning to, but aren't enrolled, anything like that. So the vast majority are exploring higher education or are currently in it. I think you can see across the demographics that's pretty clear too. And then on this, we looked at the people, okay, who has not made up their minds? Who is that quarter, third that is sort of saying, I'm not sure, or I'm not, right? They've just definitively decided not to. And you see really across demographics, but especially in the West, I think is notable that the question of being able to work and earn an income while in school is a big factor for people, as is financial aid. So you see those cost questions coming back to people. Either somebody needs to help me afford this price, whether that's me working, whether that's me getting loans or grants or something, that they're worried about the cost, right? So you see that cost is having a negative impact on those groups' ability to attend college or desire to attend college. And it's, again, it's not the debt itself, it's not the price itself that I think is really hurting people, that group that isn't sure if it's worth the value. It's, what am I going to get when I get out of this? What am I getting for this, right? The sort of concern of, am I more marketable? Am I going to get a better job, a ticket to the middle class, whatever that sort of looks like to people. That's the part of the value proposition they're not totally sure on. They know it's expensive. They can see the price, right? We're not changing minds on that. But this question of, particularly look at voters of color, look at voters in the West, where 40 to 47% are saying, I'm not willing to take that on, that price on, but overall people are saying, I will take on that debt as long as I know I'm going to get a good job from it. So that's really the thing that I think that some of these younger people need to be convinced of, is that there is a good job waiting for them, especially if they're looking in the fields that are interesting to them. And again, this is another question about, is it worth the investment, right? And you see 55% saying yes, more common among women, which I think we're seeing, the differing gender enrollment rates in school. This sure looks like part of it, but no real differences by race, by region of the state on this. Is this question of, is it worth it for me? Because after I graduate, I'll have a financially stable career. So that's where we're at. I think we're 1 minute to spare. So really happy to be part of this project, and we'll turn it back to the powers that be here.
Yes. Thanks, Brian and Robert, for reviewing and sharing those survey findings. I think certainly good to know that Tennesseans are viewing higher education, generally speaking, positively and are supporting some type of training education beyond high school diploma. I think it's also, to the point that you both made, clear that voters and 18 to 24-year-olds in particular want more from the post-secondary education system, and certainly at a time when voters recognize that a high school diploma is not enough, and a post-secondary degree or credential has value. We have to make sure that time, cost, the points around career connectedness, career value are not limiting the opportunity that that students can get from these opportunities. So I'm excited now to turn to our final portion of our SCORE Institute this morning and welcome a panel of K-12 higher education and workforce leaders to really reflect on the research that we just saw, both the economic and labor data and the public opinion findings that we've shared this morning. And so just to briefly introduce our three panelists, Harry Allen serves as the co-founder and chief relationship officer for Studio Bank. A Nashville native, Harry is active, very active in the Nashville community, currently serves as a trustee for Belmont University and as a board member for the National Public Education Foundation. Dr. Yolanda Jones serves as the president of TCAT in Ripley, Covington, and Northwest Tennessee. President Jones takes pride, I know, in leading institutions which are providers of workforce development and training in their particular areas, and certainly leads with a strong focus on student success and academic excellence. And then finally, Sean Kimball, who's the director of schools in Lauderdale County Schools. Under Sean's leadership, Lauderdale County has expanded early post-secondary opportunities, strengthened high-quality career and technical education pathways, and really focused on ensuring students are prepared for post-secondary education and workforce upon graduation. And I know is thinking a lot about this transition between high school, post-secondary education and work in his community. So thank you all so much for being with us this morning. And I really want to start first with a question just for all three of you to reflect on, and maybe can ask Sean to start, and then Yolanda, and then Harry. But as we look across both the research and the public opinion polling, would be curious to hear what findings stand out to you. What are you thinking about as you look at this data? And are there any sort of nuances that you see that particularly relate to the conversation related to the value of post-secondary education in your own context? Sean, maybe I'll ask you to start, and then we'll go to Yolanda and then Harry.
Thanks, David. And yeah, looking through that data, there were some things that really stood out to me, especially the 18 to 24-year-old group who shows the concerns about college not being worth the investment. And I think it makes me think about our work here in Lauderdale County. What have we done to advise students properly? I mean, are we giving them the information they need to make those decisions, and not pushing them down a pathway, but providing, multiple pathways and opportunities, and then deeply advising and coaching them on what's out there. And so I think too, the point that the value of a college education, is decreased, especially for that 18 to 24-year-old group. And the part that specifically says that high school hasn't prepared them for the workforce. I think I would love to be able to dig into that more and ask the questions why, because, is it we didn't do a good enough job on sharing with them what opportunities were out there and steering them in those right directions, or is it from a basic academic perspective if we've not done enough to give them the basic tools that they need? So when I'm looking at that data, it's the wheels are turning in my head. What can we do better, and what have we done, or where we maybe missed the target?
Great, thanks, Sean. Dr. Jones, what stands out for you as you look at both the opinion data and also the labor market research that Dr. Carruthers shared too?
I think the report and the polling results are very, very clear. They made the purpose of higher education deem off of there is an expectation of college. College should be preparing students for a career and not just a job. So they're telling us that they are willing to invest, but they expect as somewhat of a guarantee on their return from that investment, as they should. So I also saw that in years past, the well-rounded, broadly educated citizen was a focus. But in today's job market, we need skill training to perform at the highest level, and that's across the board, whether it's a technical college, a community college, or university. We must do a better job with alignment of labor market demands. So whether you're pursuing a degree or a credential or certification, it must be aligned to the current market demands of what jobs are available. So I think that's what I pulled from the report and the polling results. There is an expectation upon completion.
All right, that's a great segue to our third panelist, Harry. I'm curious, particularly from the perspective of a business and civic leader here in Nashville, what stands out to you from the public opinion survey and the perspectives of 18-24-year-olds, the labor market research, as you think about the findings here?
Yeah, and both Sean and Dr. Jones have touched on this. But for me, and as an employer and someone engaged in recruiting from the workforce pool every day, it's how do we ensure students maintain the long view and the long game. I think that it is important to recognize that we're in a point in the economic cycle where there's a lot of pressure on wages and demand for workers. But cycles come and go, and it's looking at what is the value over the long term. And, are we effectively counseling and partnering with students to explore career opportunities as early as possible so that they land in a career and not a job? And I think that both, Robert and Brian, as well as the research pointed to that. And finally, Dr. Jones brought up this, is the purpose of higher education building skills or this well-rounded, engaged citizen? From an employer, it's both and, right? Like the problems that companies are facing require interdisciplinary and cross-sector approaches today more than ever. So persuasive writing, strong communication, critical thinking are all skills that are honed during post-secondary education. Employers are willing to teach the technical skills that match their particular business and culture. And I think that's why you're seeing some job descriptions remove the degree requirement, because we'd almost rather train them in our way of thinking. But critical thinking and communication, you just have to have in today's world.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, and I certainly took from the findings too that that the focus on being a well-rounded citizen and preparing for what comes is important, but that by itself is not enough, and that there has to be some career connectedness and career value as we think about post-secondary experiences. So I want to turn next to this worth it question, and I think Robert used this word, worth itness, as we think about different institutions. And we saw both from the data from Tennesseans that they believe, generally speaking, that education beyond high school is worth it. We also saw in the data that Brian showed that about 90% of 18 to 24-year-olds either were pursuing post-secondary education, had pursued post-secondary education, or are considering pursuing post-secondary education. I think there are only about 11% of 18 to 24-year-olds in Tennessee who said they had no intention of pursuing post-secondary education. So I think the question I have is, how do we help ensure students obtain that credential or degree that has workforce and labor market value during this economic moment when it's easy for students to get a job right out of high school? What should be, and maybe we can start with Dr. Jones here, what should be happening in K-12 education and higher education and workforce partnerships to make post-secondary education attainable and valuable in this unique economic moment that we're in?
I think focusing on careers, jobs are easy to find, but careers establish opportunities, growth, and advancement. So in this report, it mentions turnover. So this is a huge, huge problem for employers. So we need to focus on how we make them invested in that company. The demand and the need for workers is high. So we have to find a balance with filling those skills gaps and aligning job demands. So programs should be focused. We should promote not only jobs, but the careers that you can receive. And we should also push work-based learning opportunities. So that way we can put students in the workforce so they can get these experiences, so they can make that decision, is this for me? So obtaining degrees that don't align with employment may leave students asking for more opportunities. And I think that's where we see the decline, is they want to, once they make that investment, they want to see some return, and companies want to see that these students are committed to them as well. So that's my thoughts.
Sean, how are you thinking about this in the K-12 space? I mean, you obviously have lots of students right now who are thinking about what's their post-graduation plan. And I imagine, given some of the data that we saw from University of Tennessee, that there may be more students than ever who are thinking, I may just go right into the workforce and not pursue some kind of TCAT training or community college or four-year educational experience. How are you thinking about how you coach in this moment, how you advise in this moment? What kind of conversations are you having with students in your community?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're actually working toward improving next year, because our thinking on that is we have to connect. Students have to be more connected, and their parents have to be more connected. Because when you think about what we've done in the past, maybe is not as exciting for kids. You can have a guest speaker come in, or you can do a virtual field trip in the classroom. But I think we have to do more to get kids engaged and out and looking and seeing what real jobs and real careers look like. I had an experience to see some advanced manufacturing facilities that I'd never seen before, and it changed my perspective in thinking about manufacturing jobs. And so, not only doing a deeper dive into advising students, we have to do a better job of educating parents to help them help their children make the best decisions. And so we're certainly looking at starting that much earlier than high school with our students. And I'm sharing this just because it was sitting on my desk, but I think this is relevant. This is a full 20-page insert that was in our local newspaper. We always do on career and technical education initiatives in our school district. We always do a football preseason preview, and so we felt like it was important to highlight for our community what opportunities that our kids have in our schools in a way that we've not done before. And that's just one small example, but we're looking at a lot of new and different ideas in the future. And I think this data and the information we looked at today is certainly re-energizing me to own that work to get it going even sooner.
Harry, on this question, what role does the business community have to play in solving for this as well? I mean, I'm thinking again back to that data point of only 11% of 18 to 24-year-olds say they have no intention of going to post-secondary education at some point. And so what responsibility does the business community have and workforce have to make that case of the value, even while the business community also struggles to find qualified workers in this economic moment as well?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We have to be better partners to the institutions of education, and not just higher education, but K-12 as well. To Sean's point, it's not enough to have the guest speaker every now and then, but how are business leaders and companies providing experiential learning for students at an early age? And then in the higher education space, providing internships and and making an investment. What we know is that the workforce is aging. Dr. Carruthers pointed that out. The number of 18-year-olds is approaching a cliff. You know, folks weren't having babies after the Great Recession, you know, I'll just say it. And so we have to be more intentional, you know, in light of the population and demographic trends in our country and immigration being down and just availability of workforce in reaching much younger than we are used to reaching out to young folks.
And then I want to ask maybe last question for all three of you, and then I'll go to maybe a specific question for each of you, given the unique seat you sit in. But we saw a lot in the survey data around debt, and obviously Tennessee has been a leader nationally in seeking to solve for financial barriers for students as they think about moving into post-secondary education with things like Tennessee Promise, Tennessee Reconnect, you know, expanding dual enrollment. But we also saw, even with those supports in place, real concern around the cost and financial impact of post-secondary education. And I'm wondering, as you think again about the unique work you're doing, how are you talking about conversations? How are you talking about debt? How are you talking about the financial impact of post-secondary education, of continued learning? And maybe start with Sean, then we'll go to Yolanda, and then Harry. What does that conversation look like in your community? How are you talking about debt? What are you hearing from students related to concerns about the financial cost of pursuing post-secondary education?
Yeah, no, I think it's a reality for us, especially in a rural district. Not just the concern that students have about taking on debt and that they can pay that debt back. We have students that when they graduate high school, they don't have transportation to even get to the local TCAT center. Or to the local community college. And so there are barriers there from a financial perspective that limit some of our students. But I think what we have to make sure, you know, as K-12 is we don't leave any money on the table that's available for students for dual enrollment and early post-secondary opportunities, for scholarships, for industry credentials, or you know, or any of that stuff. I think we make sure we maximize the Hope Lottery Scholarship, make sure kids are filling out and completing their FAFSA on time, and educating them and their parents better about Tennessee Promise. And I do think there's an opportunity for us in K-12 and higher ed to really do a lot more educating and trying to bring back the parents of some of our students that we're trying to coach and advise on careers for the Tennessee Reconnect, because that opportunity is still out there, but it seems to be something that we're not talking a lot about. So I think that's something we can capitalize on. But our goal for our kids, you know, we are really working toward not having any students graduate with just a high school diploma. I mean, we want them to have an industry credential, a guaranteed apprenticeship if they don't plan to go to college, a completed TCAT degree, or a majority of the hours toward a TCAT degree. And we started a middle college program in our district, and we're paying for students to get associate's degrees. So we're trying to provide multiple pathways to open it up for our kids, and do that in a way that jumpstarts them and limits the amount of potential debt they have once they leave our doors. So I think we do in K-12. People think, well, college debt's not K-12's responsibility. I do think we play a vital role in that.
Yolanda, how's this conversation about debt and the financial cost play out at TCAT? And I'm actually thinking not just about the out-of-pocket financial cost, but oftentimes the opportunity cost too, right? Of perhaps not going into the workforce and choosing to do a TCAT training program for 6 or 9 months. How do you talk about that at the TCAT level?
Well, for us, of course, the cost of college is always a question. I think we have to do a better job of not just educating our students, but those that pay the bills as well. Based on this report, we see that most people are not aware of the financial opportunities and scholarships that are available to them, so they feel like they can't afford it. But also for us as a TCAT, you know, tuition and fees are great, but we also have that extra debt when it comes to equipment and supplies and things like that. So for me, just educating the students on what debt is, limiting that, along with aligning with regular employment. We have a lot of students now that have to work and go to school. So putting those two combinations together, that we can strengthen and support that student that has that family, that has those kids. So for me, educating the student on what all is available, no matter the age, also working with our industry partners to help support scholarships and looking for additional funding so there's limited out-of-pocket expenses. So if a student can graduate with zero debt, it's a win-win, not only for them, but it's a win for the institution and the jobs that they start pursuing. So then they have something available so they can continue their education as well.
And, we certainly saw in the opinion data this question around time flexibility too, right? How do we create more opportunities for students to be pursuing a post-secondary credential or degree while also working in a high demand, career field and being able to do both of those things at the same time?
Exactly.
Yeah. Maybe finally on this question, Harry, and I know you're wearing multiple hats in this conversation and given your role as an employer, also sitting on the board of a trustees of a four-year university here in Nashville as well, wondering how you think about this conversation related to debt. How are you thinking about that, given the various hats that you wear in
That's right. And a banker, you're going to ask the banker about
right, exactly.
But, yes, there are multiple hats. I am a trustee at Belmont, and it is a conversation for sure. And, we have tried to be innovative in providing access and opportunity for folks to participate in our institution through programs like the Bridges to Belmont program and raising the endowment to provide more institutional support to students. But it's a real issue. I'm also a parent of 3 kids, and we play the game of life and talk about when you make the choice when you're playing that game, whether you're going to go straight into a job or pay that $100,000 to go into debt to college. It's a real thing. I go back to early and consistent counseling and advising, and if we, by the time a student chooses to go into higher education, have done our job in advising them into a field that they're interested in and matches their natural aptitude, then that return on investment, whether they've accessed a TCAT, community college or four-year degree, is better insured. And so I think the challenge with debt is we send 18-year-olds who have no idea what they want to be when they grow up, and they borrow a lot of money and then don't use what they got their degree in. And that's an unfortunate circumstance too often. So do we have enough guidance counselors and support for students to choose the right field or be better prepared for that choice, and then yield the return on investment, which the research showed is there.
I want to turn to maybe a specific question for each of you before we end our discussion. And Sean, you shared a little bit about some of the work that you're doing in Lauderdale County, which I think, just for the folks who are joining us today, if you don't mind, also setting a little context about, for those who may not know Tennessee geography, where is Lauderdale County? Tell us a little bit about the students that you serve. And then if you could talk a little bit more about the specific kinds of CTE, career pathways, post-secondary pathway programs that you're working on, and maybe get a little bit deeper into how you're thinking about that work in your community.
Yeah, Lauderdale County, if we went any farther west, we'd be in the Mississippi River. So that's where we're at, just north of Memphis and Tipton County. But we serve about 3,500 students. That number's been declining for the last 10 years or more in West Tennessee as populations declined across our region. We've been a distressed county for as long as I can remember, and we feel kind of excited that we're no longer distressed. We're just at risk now. So I don't know what that means, how that's much different than being distressed. But, we meet some of those, as I mentioned earlier, some of the challenges from a socio and economic standpoint that our students experience. And I think for us, there's a lot of opportunity today with Innovative Schools Model Grant, with folks' eyes open to the need for K-12 higher ed and industry partners to be more aligned than they've ever been. And I think that's what we're working toward. I think we have to continue to strengthen our partnerships with higher ed, but also as I mentioned, with our industry partners at the table. And we can't be afraid to innovate and do things that we've never done in the past. I've been really blessed because of our relationship with UT Martin, with University of Memphis, Jackson State. I don't want to leave anybody out, but our local TCAT. We have a lot of opportunities for our students. In fact, Dr. Jones and I are meeting today to walk through a school that we're renovating a space to add a new welding machining lab, and also looking at a space there for where we're planning on expanding into mechatronics as well. So we're looking at aligning and providing quality pathways for our kids. But I think a few key things that we're looking at is strengthening and doing in the future is STEM foundations for all of our kids K-12, and critical thinking, as you mentioned earlier, Harry, and problem solving and doing a better job there. And as I mentioned, career and post-secondary exposure. How can we get our kids and families more engaged, to know what's out there, to learn to more and to be more connected? And I think trying to figure out a way to develop our teachers, our current staff, and to bring on some hard staff positions to supplement our STEM education initiatives, because teacher shortages are a real thing across our state. And I've already mentioned several times the piece on deep advising, and having that dedicated workforce to doing that and keeping kids on track. And then I mentioned earlier again, I think family connections, staying connected with families, bringing families in and parents in with students as they're learning is going to be a key to our success and moving forward. So we like everyone else, we have so many districts in West Tennessee and across the state of Tennessee that are doing good work, and we're just trying to find our place in that and continue to build those strong partnerships that will help our students long term.
Great, thanks, Sean. All right, Dr. Jones, tell us a little bit about the TCATs that you lead, the students you serve, where those campuses are. And then I think the particular question would love for you to share some thoughts on is, I mean, TCATs have received a lot of attention, in part because of the ability to quickly prepare a student for a career and for a job. And I'm curious about, are there any lessons learned or perspectives you would share that you think could be relevant for any kind of post-secondary institution as we think about how to make post-secondary more workforce and career connected in approach?
Well, I am in rural West Tennessee. I cover several counties in TCAT Northwest, which includes not only Obion, but Tipton and Dyer and Lauderdale and Lake and Crockett. So I expand a wide range, and our students that come to us vary in range from 18 years old to 60 years old and higher. They are coming to be trained and retrained. And I think one of the great things that we offer as a TCAT is that we are program specific. So all of our focus and attention, as Harry mentioned before, is based on that particular program. So not only are we teaching individualized training, which a lot of students now would prefer because it takes a shorter amount of time. So we focus on detailed training, but we also add that component of being that qualified, highly skilled worker with communications and being able to critically think and make decisions. And so for me, our students are looking for opportunities not only for a job, but to be able to be advanced on their jobs as well. So one of the things that I would say that in West Tennessee, students, once they find those jobs, they want opportunities. So whether we're training welders or practical nurses or dental assistants or truck drivers, they look at not only the salary that they'll be obtaining, but they're also looking for ways that they can continue that advancement. So one of the things that I saw in the study that was less favorable for us is, although people think TCATs are great, and I agree, they also saw us as the lowest favorable because we do struggle with the perception of technical college. We do struggle with that as it compared to our sister institutions, our community colleges and universities. So if there is anything that I could do, I think I have to do a better job of saying that we are all equally important, just dependent on your path. We all offer something special. We just have to build off of what we do. And so for us, creating those partnerships, not only with, Sean is on the call, he's one of my greatest partners, but industry as well. We all have to tie it all together to make it work. So if there's anything I would say is we need to do an alignment across the board, that wherever you start from kindergarten to career, we need to be working together to create that dynamic workforce that Tennessee expects.
Thank you, Yolanda. All right, last question, Harry. I'll turn it over to you. Obviously, if there's anything else you'd want to share about Studio or the institutions you're also representing, feel free to. But I think my big question here, and maybe just to build on what Yolanda said, is what does it look like for a community across lots of institutions, K-12, higher ed, business, nonprofit partners, to solve for this challenge? We certainly, again, we saw from the data, post-secondary education matters. We have fewer students, however, who are moving into post-secondary education. And we know that it matters in terms of having a successful career and set of economic opportunities. So what does it look like for a community to rally around this? And maybe what would you hope would be true either in Nashville or across our state around solving for this challenge?
Wow, you just passed me the magic wand, and if I waved it, what happens? No, I think that this conversation has been so energizing for me. I don't know that the business community is always invited to the table for conversations around K-12 and higher education. And so I think the big part of it is more cross-sector collaboration and deep partnership with the private sector and our institutional sectors. I also think, it's about, in our state in particular, I really honed in on that graph that showed the decline of the college going rate. And I have to think that advising, deep advising, I think is what Sean said, and counseling has to be a part of that. And so how do we continue to present opportunities that challenge the perspectives of young people beyond their front porch or their neighborhood, and show them what's possible while providing them the education to make that possibility a reality. And that's really hard work and kind of pie in the sky, but I think that Tennessee is positioned well with Tennessee Promise and the number of institutions we have to be different and to be a standout in that regard. So I'm engaged and excited about the hard work ahead, and however Studio Bank and my business peers can be helpful, we're ready to do so.
Thanks so much, Harry. Really, really appreciate it. So that will conclude our panel discussion here. I just want to say thanks to our panelists and also our presenters for sharing their expertise, their perspectives today. I think conversation really reflects our beliefs at SCORE that it takes deep collaboration across all stakeholders to really support student success in the right ways. And really just to kind of conclude our conversation, I want to share a couple of key points that are top of mind for me, and I know our team at SCORE as we come out of this conversation and reflect on the data and the research that we've seen, and also the conversation we've just had. First is when we think about post-secondary education, perception matched reality. Education beyond high school still matters for success in an in-demand career that enables economic independence. Tennesseans view higher education positively, but at the same time, they express only soft satisfaction with the way the higher education system is working today. And we also know that a college education is a large upfront investment of time and money for some students, but the payoff from higher lifetime earnings usually makes it worthwhile. And again, just to reiterate the point that Dr. Crothers made earlier, for bachelor's degrees, that means an additional $1.5 million in lifetime earnings, an amount that certainly can fundamentally transform and change family trajectories. The second maybe big sort of reflection here is that Tennesseans' commitment and Tennessee's commitment to post-secondary access and completion is an unfinished agenda that needs to be refreshed and supported by student-focused leaders with clear alignment to career preparation. And we saw again in Tennessee, we take a broad view of what college and post-secondary education is in our state. We saw that Tennesseans place particular value in our technical colleges, our two-year community colleges, our non-degree training programs, many of which are pathways that are supported by the current design of Tennessee Promise. And even as some participants in the survey work we did questioned the overall value of four-year degrees, we know that Tennesseans aspire to more post-secondary education. Nearly 2/3 of younger Tennesseans, as an example, would be willing to take on college debt if they were guaranteed a good job. And again, we saw this point earlier of voters' highest preference for where they would want their own child to go to school is a four-year university or college. So certainly, I think this is a good challenge given Celeste's research that showed us the incredible employment durability and wage gains that come from education beyond high school. The average long-term payoff from enrolling in college remains large, remains positive, but certainly not guaranteed. And we have to do more to improve the value proposition so that post-secondary education leads to career preparedness and success. Third, we can build on Tennesseans and Tennessee students' aspirations to create real game-changing pathways from education to career. We have to recommit to a broad view of college and education beyond high school. Certainly the survey work we saw showed clear support for initiatives like Tennessee Promise, like middle school and high school college and career awareness work and career and technical education work. And despite the immediate labor market environment where high school only jobs are paying more and more readily available, we also know this environment might not last. For individual Tennesseans, the research is clear that recessions tend to hit workers without college harder. We want to prepare students for a lifetime of college success, not fleeting earnings from lower skilled jobs. We have to redesign pathways and delivery models. We have to use data to align to high wage in-demand careers. Certainly have more work to do to make sure we have stronger pathways and advise students. We heard a lot about advising in the conversation, and we certainly think at SCORE that this will require better, more available, more usable state data that clarifies the earning and employment outcomes of different courses of study to inform decision-making at the student level, college and career advising, and to also inform how districts and institutions prioritize different pathways of learning. And then, we have to respond to students who need more advising, more aligned pathways, and more supports beyond learning. We know that across the board, we have more to do, in particular to support students of color, those from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, to access and complete education beyond high school. And so whether that's access to relevant high school coursework, intensive advising, financial support beyond tuition, we have to do more to ensure success in higher education is the norm and less the result of a student's Herculean efforts. And again, I just want to go back to this data point that we showed earlier. Only 11% of 18 to 24-year-olds said they had no plan or desire to attend education beyond high school. So we have to make sure that we're making the desires of the other 89% of students a reality. And finally, just fundamentally believe that Tennessee can lead the conversation on post-secondary education as a pathway to high quality careers. And certainly now's the time to be a leader in that work across the country. SCORE is excited to stand ready and to partner with many of you, leaders, practitioners, advocates, to make this a reality for students. As we close our SCORE Institute today, I just want to say a brief thank you to our presenters, our researchers who joined us today, our leaders who shared their own perspectives from K-12 to higher ed to workforce. I also want to say thank you to our SCORE team for all the work around preparing this event, in particular to Peter Tang and Janelle Brown, who played such a key role in pulling together both the research and the event that we're participating in today. And I want to thank you all for being with us. Thanks for spending the last hour and a half with us, learning with us. We'll be sending out an email after this SCORE Institute to share both the research findings, the data, and the public perception findings. So you'll have that information readily available to you as well. And we are adjourned. Happy Friday and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks so much.